Excellent. Thank you, Carleen. Um, Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to go over this information and wanted to thank Carla for inviting us to speak. So, rentercertification.org is a nonprofit that was originally created from a few individuals that were long-term landlords or property managers and with about 25 years of experience and working with companies that own several thousand rental housing units. All of those were market rate or non-subsidized units. So the place that this nonprofit started in was a little bit different than uh, some of the programs that are focused on affordable housing. And what I mean by that is in in the United States, in urban markets, roughly 90% of all housing units are for profit in some manner. 70% of those are owned by what we call mom and pop owners. Those are owners that own and rent less than 4 units. About 20% are owned by medium to large entities. These could be REITs or for-profit development companies or investment companies. And then only 10% of them are owned by some type of accessible housing entity. And so that could be housing authorities, it could be VA, federally assisted or tax advantage development, things of that nature, nonprofits as well, or education related. Now, when you look at rural markets, and North Dakota is a very rural state. I'm actually based in Oregon, and aside from a few areas in the metropolitan area in Portland, we're not much different from much of the state than North Dakota or as North Dakota. In fact, I think we are 42nd, North Dakota's 39th as far as population density. Less than 1% of the housing units in these rural markets are accessible units, tax advantage, nonprofit, federally funded in some way. And so the vast majority of housing options available to individuals who are in need of accessible housing one way or another, whether that's driven by maybe being justice impacted, having a criminal record, having some type of a disability, having low credit score, low income, undocumented income, things of that nature are available through, or so 99% of them are going to be something that they need to apply in a normal method. When I say normal, I'm talking not necessarily through a housing authority or voucher-based system. So that's kind of the background in that the vast majority of units that are out there are ones that anybody can apply for in theory. And what we saw was that there was a big gap between what the application process is, especially on the larger ownership side, and the understanding of individuals who are applying for those units. So, what we're going to go through is some information around what we have seen as best practices, both based off of what those larger industry participants look for, but also talking about different things that can be done by the individual applying for housing to put them in the best position to access the vast majority of those units. Some of this is also going to go through renters' rights, and which are going to vary by state. So I'm going to talk about that very broadly. But I would like to, if anybody has questions during this, feel free to interrupt. If we want to talk about a specific situation, happy to dive into that to the degree we can. We come from a very different background in that we're industry experts from the landlord side, and we firmly believe that through education we can help individuals who are at risk of housing instability access a lot of the housing units that historically have not gone to individuals with some of those underlying issues because of a lack of understanding of the process or a lack of education, not just for the applicants, but also for the landlords. So with that, I'm gonna kick off and start running through this. If anybody has any questions, though, please drop them in chat. I'll try to watch for that. Or I think everybody's able to. I don't know if they have to raise their hands, Carly, or if they can just jump in. But
They can just jump in or
okay,
type in the chat. Yeah, we're comfortable with either
yeah,
way.
all right, take it wherever we want. So all right. So what rentercertification.org is actually an online educational course. Um, the idea behind this is that education is almost always one of the most efficient methods of taking um, a set amount of resources, whether that's time or in a lot of cases, it is a budget. The biggest impact almost always comes with starting at the low hanging fruit, starting at let's just really get down to the nitty gritty of um, you know educating individuals so that they understand at a very basic level how to attack the problem. Now, this absolutely is not going to be the the answer to everything. It's not going to be the answer for all individuals and all backgrounds, but there is no individual that is not going to benefit from having an understanding of the way that the process works in non I'm going to say market rate. I'm just going to use that as shorthand for non-subsidized units. And of course, there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a whole bunch of different breakdowns as to what that subsidized looks like. Everything from housing authorities to tax advantaged voucher systems, project voucher systems. So we're going to call all of non-market rate. So those are assisted housing in some way. The vast majority, especially in North Dakota, is going to be your market rate housing. So what our course does, and the course is free, any individual can take it, is that they can bring with them either in person or send electronically to a landlord that addresses a lot of the underlying questions that landlords typically have when looking at an applicant. And it not only helps them to create that packet itself, but it helps them to do the background work to bring some of that documentation or to create some of the documentation. So, course offers comprehensive guidance to tenants facing challenges in the rental market due to background issues such as criminal records, poor credit scores, eviction histories, immigration status. It covers the rental application process, background checks, building a strong rental history, improving credit scores, and effective communication with landlords. The course is designed for diverse audience, including those with non-traditional employment, first-time renters, and property managers, and landlords who work with such tenants. It's very broad. There's no cost to anyone ever to do it. And the real objective is to understand the rental application process and background check process, what that looks like from the industry side. It is very rare that we talk to an individual who is submitting an application and they have a thorough understanding of the process that that application goes through before it gets to the approval and denial stage. Second is learn strategies to build strong rental history and improve credit scores, addressing some of these possible challenges ahead of time, gain insights into providing effective references and communicating honestly with potential landlords, navigating rental challenges related to criminal records, poor credit, eviction history, immigration status. We can expand that list to include any challenge at all, anything that is seen as a barrier to an individual getting approved for as a renter. And that list is very long and very depending on the individual itself. Familiarize with relevant laws and regulations, including fair housing laws. Utilize practical strategies for overcoming background challenges in the rental market. Target audience I think we kind of went through this, individuals with non-traditional employment seeking practical strategies. The big barriers that you're looking at we'll take a big apartment complex as kind of our standard application. Though I would point out that, again, the vast majority of units are going to be owned by smaller mom and pops, and that's a real benefit to individuals applying because it allows for access at a greater degree than you would have otherwise. But if we think about a larger apartment complex, some of the key things that are going to get an individual denied early on in the process are going to be things like not having verifiable employment or income or not being able to prove it. Indiv- Someone who's facing challenges due to some type of a background issue, could be criminal background, credit, eviction history, bankruptcy, things of that nature. And then first time renters and those with difficulties in the past. So individuals who just don't have established credit or they don't have a rental history. And I went through this on this overview is pretty comprehensive. Sorry, the presentation is pretty comprehensive. So I'm going to jump over some of this um, because we essentially went through it. So the goal of this course is, again, to create that packet, and we just call it a packet that the individual can have and to take with them when doing the application for housing. Now, many of the things that are going to be included in that could be beneficial to these individuals in a bunch of other situations as well. What we have found is that the process of creating a budget, the process of going through identifying what their credit history or the rental history is, doing any type of explaining that needs to be done there or cleaning up any issues that they have to clean up, that those same steps can be very helpful in other aspects of their lives as well, in addition to helping to find and keep stable housing. So the first portion of that lesson is determining the budget and managing expenses. These are the steps that we run through, and any individual who's looking to submit an application to a traditional landlord, one of the things that they're going to want to do to set themselves apart right from the beginning, especially if they have some type of an issue, with their application. As we mentioned earlier, there's various things that could be, but there's almost no one single item that will get an individual declined. There might be, depending on the state, there are different laws regarding what can be included in the background check and what cannot. But there are very few that, in and of themselves, will have an individual get declined right off the bat with no explanation. That's good in that allows for some input from the tenant if they're prepared to explain some of the issues that might come up. One of the most important things to do initially is make sure that the individual has a written budget plan that helps them keep track of exactly where the money is coming in, where is it going out, and determining how much of that's going to be able to be allocated toward housing. If there's assistance that's being brought in one way or another, whether that's housing specific assistance or assistance for related to any other benefit that they're receiving, that of course helps. But it is very important that that is explained in the process of the application. The reason for that is that a lot of the applications are very formulaic in what they ask for. And so they may ask for, income, employment related income. And many individuals say, well, I don't have normal employment related income. My income is coming from SSDI or from other assistance or VA, something of that nature. So I'm going to put 0 there. Though they may be answering that question in the correct manner, the way that they're reading it, that's not what the landlord is asking for. What they're interested in is what is your total income in relation to what the rent is, because all landlords are going to have some formula that determines how much an individual can afford as to whether they'll be approved for that rental or not. So making sure that individuals understand that these questions, when they're asked, are asking for what's your total allowable income. And you would include things if you had housing vouchers, et cetera, in that. Making that budget helps to see where the money goes each month, helps them figure out if they need to cut back in some way in order to save a little bit more going towards housing or towards utilities, but it also helps them to determine what type of housing might be the best fit. For example, there might be housing that includes more of the utilities in the underlying rent itself, and that may help somebody who has a tighter budget be able to meet that bill each month, even if it simply means that the variability of the bill is steady across the year. So they're not having larger heating bills in the winter, for example. The application process. So the first thing that we do is help individuals build that uh, build that budget. And there's it comes out when they fill it out, when they complete it. It's going to be an actual form that they'll download and put in their packet that shows exactly here's what my income is, here's where it comes from, here's what my expenses are. The first step after that, and the reason that's so important is to understand, okay, well, what is the budget for housing? That budget is going to determine things as to what type of unit that the individual can look for. And when we talk about housing, a lot of the emphasis, and I think some of the terminology that we use, we're talking about units, but we can really broaden that out, and we'll speak to that a little bit later as well, that there are myriad different flavors of housing out there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that the individual is applying for an apartment unit or for a house or for a mobile home. Maybe they're going to be renting a room in a group home or be a roommate with somebody who already has a unit that they own or that they rent. All of that adds additional housing potential. And all of those types of, I'll call them non-traditional, though I simply mean by non-traditional that the process for applying for and securing that housing is not your kind of the industry standard of going online, submitting an application. But any of those non-standard housing options are beneficial for individuals who need to do some type of explaining because their background or their situation or their income level is different than what the sort of normal cookie cutter corporate apartment application process is looking for. So that's actually a benefit. If an individual goes through the budget and they say, okay, I get $1,800 a month, a combination of work and some type of assistance. Usually what you'll see is that a landlord is going to approve a rental at somewhere around 2 to 2.5% or 2 to 2.5 times. Their income needs to be 2 to 2.5 times what their portion of the rent is. That number can be all over the place. It can be from 1.5 all the way up to 3 or 4, depending on the type of property, depending on how much utilities are included. And so what that means is that if somebody has, if there's a rental that somebody's looking at and it's $600 a month, that person is going to need to make at the very, very low end, and I would, it would probably, you probably would not see this unless it was subsidized, but on the very low end, they're going to need to make $900 a month, but probably they're going to need to be up around the 12 to 15 to $1,800 a month. So by determining, how much of the income can be put towards housing, that really helps determine what type of housing the applicant should be looking at. If the number is substantially lower than that, or if there's a reason lower than what a normal apartment unit might be, or if there's a reason that they would benefit from being in a more social environment, a group home, something where there are other individuals around, then maybe that's the best place to look at. And doing those applications for traditional corporate owned housing, apartments or houses, is probably not the best fit for that individual. So once the individual has identified kind of what their budget is, next part is, looking through the types of properties and being really analytical about it. And that doesn't mean that it has to be done in a spreadsheet. What it means is using tools or having caretakers or somebody around them if they if they have such assistance, use tools like Google Street View to be able to look at what the area around those rentals are ahead of time without having to spend time, energy, or money getting to them. This is especially useful in areas that are rural. For individuals who don't necessarily have great access to transportation, technology has really allowed you can get out there and you can kind of plot that path and say, okay, how far is this from, a grocery store? How far is this from transportation? Once someone has identified that rental in that area that they like, you're going to want to go and try to see that unit. That is not always possible, especially since COVID. We've really seen a move where, and part of this is due to the increased demand from, across the country, rental demand it has steadily increased. And I think that has driven a couple of things. It's driven rent up, but it's also driven the selectivity of the process and the automation of the process of applicants. So landlords are able to demand a little bit more. And one of the things that we're seeing is that they're demanding that these applications be done ahead of time before they will even show somebody a unit. That's not necessarily great, but it is, I think, part of just the automation process of the industry. And there's a couple of important things with that I think make checking out the area and doing as much due diligence as the individual can ahead of time really important. Because not only is doing that application going to be time consuming, most of them are going to require an application fee. Now, depending on the state, that application fee may or may not be refundable, depending on the process that they go through and when that fee is collected. So, doing as much of that kind of checking out of the area ahead of time, looking at reviews online, if you know somebody who lives in that area, asking them about it, driving around, really, making sure that, okay, all else being equal, this checks a lot of the boxes I need it to have. Maybe the individual doesn't have transportation, so they're going to need to have grocery store, medical access, things of that nature within walking distance or public transportation distance. And then after the application process, lease agreement and move in. Our education, so our course goes all the way through the developing of the budget and the background information, all the way through the move in itself, and not just getting that housing, but maintaining that housing, making sure that the individuals understand what's required of them to be the best tenant that they can be. Because housing stability is not just about checking the box of getting the housing now, though that often is the most pressing issue, but ensuring that that housing is retained. And there are methods that allow for individuals to mitigate some of the challenges in the tenant side of the rental journey. Things like rent increases, notices, dealing with lease violations. And so we do spend a good part of the education course on that. And that's going to be the next module that we're going to add on, which is kind of that continuing, rental management side. Housing assistance. So we in our education course, we walk through different programs. And again, back to education, there are a lot of different methods of getting assistance, both monetary and then actual guidance out there. They're going to vary by state, they're going to vary by municipality, they're going to vary by the status of the individual themselves, things such as VA or other assistance that some individuals may qualify for. But one of the key things in this process, even though the number of units that are actually owned or controlled by subsidized housing, which I'm using very broadly to indicate anything that's not your traditional corporate for-profit housing, even though the number of units that's controlled by them is very small proportionally, that doesn't mean that the assistance cannot be used for market rate rentals. And so there is a type of Section 8 housing voucher It's called a project-based voucher, and that's a voucher that actually stays with the building itself. So the building, the unit itself, has a subsidization that comes with it, and individuals apply for that, and they're going to be accepted based off of income levels, et cetera. But the bulk of the Section 8 vouchers or federal assistance vouchers, housing assistance vouchers, at least in North Dakota, are not used on those types of properties. They're used on traditional market rate rental properties. So an individual who is approved on for a Section 8 voucher can take that and theoretically go to any unit that they qualify for and use that. Now, in practice, in theory, that is true. That they're able to take that voucher, and as long as they qualify for that unit, then there's no restrictions. One of the issues we see, or the big issue that we see, is that in practice, there are landlords that are not interested in having an individual who has a Section 8 voucher as a renter. Some states, it is illegal to differentiate between tenants based off of the method that they pay. Oregon's one of those states. However, proving that somebody's doing that is very difficult. And one of the things that we really want to try and do from our organization standpoint is take our industry knowledge and be very blunt about the way the process works. When an individual is approved or not approved to become a renter, there are myriad different things that are looked at. And being able to differentiate, being able to say, well, the reason I'm not renting to this person is because of a Section 8 voucher versus, anything else is almost impossible. We don't think that it's even worth doing because there are enough landlords out there who are happy to take housing assistance vouchers. And a lot of what we have found is that when we're dealing with smaller landlords, that once they're educated on what the process is and what it actually means, that it becomes less scary. Very much like individuals often don't understand the nuances of what those vouchers entail, landlords often do not understand as well the benefits of having an individual who has some type of assistance in their housing support as a tenant. So one of the first things that an individuals want to do is, research the rental assistance programs in the area. So are there properties that are actually subsidized properties themselves? Who's the housing authority that oversees that area? Does the individual qualify for some type of support, whether that's a Section 8 voucher or other programs that they may have? And housing authorities typically can be a really great source of information for other types of assistance that an individual might benefit from. So it's one of the first things that we encourage, anyone taking our course to do is find out who the local housing authority is that services your area, your city, county, region, and approach them for one, is it something that you would qualify for getting assistance? In some cases, the assistance can be quite small, but it could be something that covers some of the utilities or something that covers a small portion of the housing, but still could be very valuable. And then also, what are other assistance programs out there that the individual might qualify for? So, and some of those, especially based off the status of the individual, if it's somebody who is experiencing homelessness currently or who is at risk of experiencing homelessness, there are additional funds typically in markets to help and prevent that. So if you have somebody who's in a crisis situation currently where they're at risk of losing their housing or they, are currently homeless, housing authorities typically, though it may not be funding that they themselves control, are well connected to different groups who might be able to assist. And sometimes those are other governmental agencies or entities. They could also be faith-based organizations. Some educational institutions also have assistance both for students and community members as well. So a really great resource there. Alternative living arrangements. We've talked about this a little bit earlier, and there is absolutely a place for these types of situations for individuals, either in the short term or long term. And I think it's important that these are not downplayed because in a lot of cases, some of these ideas are going to be the most flexible, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be the easiest to overcome some of the challenges that individuals who have background that have some type of an issue in their background that is preventing them from successfully accessing your standard housing. These could be a great way to get them on their feet, get them housed, and then work on, if it makes sense, work on a more permanent housing situation. So subleasing, that's simply, looking for, and there are, social media has become a good tool for this, but subleasing is just looking at taking over the remainder or a portion of a lease that's in process currently. Renting a room on Airbnb or VRBO for temporary stays. We have seen a growing trend of conversion where individuals for various reasons end up in a temporary situation in booked through Airbnb or Verbo, where they have had great success in talking to the host, often individuals who own the properties themselves, and asking if do they have other units or do they have anything that's available for longer term rental. Um, Clearly that is a more expensive option when you're looking at a furnished unit, but it is a, a good way of allowing somebody to get in and establish a rapport with a landlord and show that they can be, a reliable tenant. And it's something that really flies, I think, under the radar a little bit. And it's also has a stigma with Airbnb and VRBOs being some of the reasons that the rental rates are driven up in different markets. I think that it is overlooked because of that. And I think it's something that, especially in some of your more urban areas, could be a good lead into other types of housing situations. Seeking community support, so ensuring that individuals are engaging with local religious organizations, nonprofits, support organizations that can uncover housing opportunities that are not widely advertised. Finding roommates. So sharing a rental can significantly reduce living costs and make more locations accessible. Individuals who may not be able to get approved on their own might be able to get approved when living with somebody else. RV or camp trailer living, more unconventional approach, consider renting an RV or camp trailer. Again, this may or may not make sense depending on the season, depending on the area, the location, but when a decent number of our constituents are involved in some type of a transient work, especially out here in Oregon, and I know North Dakota is agriculture is a large portion of the economy there as well. So there are situations where housing is somewhat of a seasonal challenge, and that can be something that is can be overcome using a little bit non-traditional types of housing. And then leveraging word of mouth, never underestimate the power of asking around. So one of the things that we tell people right away is, if you have someone who's looking for housing, they should be talking to everybody they know, saying, "Hey, I'm looking for something. If you think of or know anybody that is renting a room, or if they have an ADU or a little apartment over the garage, or etc., please pass along my information." Some of the most ideal rentals for individuals that have issues or challenges in their backgrounds are ones that are not widely advertised. They are the proverbial room over the garage of the little old lady down the street. Those can be very beneficial for the renters themselves, and they can be very beneficial for the landlords, many of whom are not your traditional landlord who make it easy to find their rentals like the larger corporate ones do. So the next few slides here are going to run through the different steps in the process. I'm going to run through them really fast. Any individual that's interested in going through the renter certification course, it's free to do it. They can just go to the website and sign up. There's no cost ever. either for the education, for the course itself, or for any of the materials or follow up afterwards. We don't even have a mechanism to collect money in any way or donation. So I encourage anybody who's interested in that to go to rentercertification.org and take a look at the course itself. But essentially, what you want to do is we want individuals to treat applying for housing like they would, applying for a job. The more prepared the individual is ahead of time, the more they are going to set themselves apart from the average applicant, but also the greater ability they are going to have to overcome whatever challenges they may have or believe they have in finding housing. So number one, proof of income. We deal with individuals that don't have traditional employment often, and that can lead to all kinds of challenges. But when we look at what we're trying to address, we think it from the landlord standpoint, the landlord's really looking for a couple of things. They're looking for one, does this individual have the ability to pay the rent consistently and on time? Two, is this individual going to cause damage to my property, or are they going to cause issues in the community itself and with other tenants? Three, is it someone that is going to cause liability or problems for me longer term? And four, are they going to be a long-term tenant? Typically, vacancy and turnover are one of the biggest expenses for landlords. So anytime a landlord can mitigate that, that's going to be beneficial to them. So what we want to do is encourage the individuals to put forth not just in the information that they have themselves, but also in the way that they approach and speak with or interact with the landlords or property managers, really keeping those things in mind. Because when we're looking at proof of income, what we're addressing is, do you have the ability to pay? So people should not be fixated on, well, it says, what's my employment income? And I'm not employed. I have disability. Well, that's okay. That's not what they're asking for necessarily, right? They're asking for the ability to pay. So what we're going to want to do there is say, well, what are we able to provide that shows that you have income that is going to cover the rent? So that could be, SSDI statements, it could be bank statements, it could be tax returns, it could be things, any type of a benefit summary that's showing, okay, here's what I have coming in. Or in the case if somebody has a housing voucher or a housing grant of some kind, would be a copy of what that is. So we're going to want to put that together. Reference letters, anything that solves the second part of that equation, which is this an individual? Is this someone that is going to take care of my property and that's not going to cause issues? These can be short letters of reference from previous landlords, employers, teachers, religious leaders, anyone that can vouch for the tenant. That's a really good thing that we want to have in the packet, and part of the process is helping these individuals, request and get these types of letters. They should not be long. They need to be 1 or 2 paragraphs, and again, all we're doing is we're trying to kind of check that box of the landlord feeling good renting to this individual. Rental history, so details of the previous rentals, including addresses, dates of tenancy, and can demonstrate your experience of a tenant as a tenant. This doesn't have to be traditional rentals. So if somebody lived, you can think of almost any background. Everything from an individual is a brand new renter and they've never lived anywhere outside of their family's home before. That's fine. Put that down. Here's where I lived. I lived with my parents. That's why I don't have a rental history. You can just do a short little blob explaining that. Or if they were, for example, coming out of the military, coming out of educational institute, coming out of medical institution, anything of that nature. Really, it's just checking that box and showing where was this individual at. One of the things that the landlord is going to look to do is going to be to verify that history. Specifically, what they're looking for are the negative things, right? Was this somebody that you had to evict? Was this somebody that tore the place up, et cetera? So checking that box off and providing that rental history, a lot of times applicants assume, well, because it was not a traditional housing situation, I was living with my family, I was living with friends or whatever, I shouldn't put that on there. That's absolutely not correct. You absolutely want to put that on there because, again, if there's no information there, it's assumed to be worse than if it's just I lived, with my family. Criminal record documentation, very important that people are forthcoming with any type of criminal record that they might have. It's going to vary by state as to what can be included, what can't be included. But one of the things when we say forthcoming, what we mean is providing documentation, not just saying, I have a criminal record for X, will you rent to me? Because that's not the way that you want to present a situation in the past. So if you have a criminal record, getting a copy of your record, what were you charged with? What were you convicted with? When was it? Um, and it can help you understand any potential hurdles and address them directly with the landlord. So, is this something that's going to prevent getting approved, or is this something that's not? And what we would say is that in almost all situations, having an understanding, and it is, I'd say it is very common that individuals do not have an exact understanding of what is on their criminal record, if they have one, is very important. Understanding what is there, and then more importantly, where are they at in that process? Are they still on parole? If they are on parole, we're going to want a letter from their parole officer, the PO, stating that they're in compliance with whatever the court ordered um, parole conditions are. If it has something to do with substance abuse and there was counseling or rehabilitation that was required, that they've completed that. You want to document, the individual wants to document what this is so that it becomes a known quantity and it's not this sort of amorphous, you know, you don't want the landlord to assume things. You want them to know exactly what it was. Showing the criminal record and being forthcoming and doing this preparation work sets individuals apart from the vast majority of applicants, even ones without criminal records. And it can go a long way towards turning a decline into an acceptance or conditional acceptance. So, certificate of rehabilitation, kind of addressed that earlier. So this document proves you've made significant positive changes following any past criminal or substance abuse issues. And this just goes a little bit further into that letter of probation officer, counselor, sponsor. Again, one paragraph. This individual is in compliance with all the court ordered counseling or treatment. That's all it has to be, here's what I was convicted of. I went through treatment, I went through probation, I'm off of it. Maybe especially if it's something that was a while back, an explanation of, this was something that happened when, 10 years ago. Here are the changes I've made since then. This is not going to be an issue. Support animal documentation. So we're going to jump into service animals. If you have a service animal, support animal, include any relevant documentation, letter from a healthcare provider, counselor, other entity or person that certifies that your support animal qualifies for an exemption and is a medical necessity, not a pet. Very important that individuals do this. Now, we'll go through a little bit later on. We don't necessarily recommend that an individual with a service animal discloses that right up front. There's a proper time to do that. We certainly don't ever want to mislead anyone, but often tenants will come and lead, or potential tenants will lead with what they think are their weakest areas. And so they'll jump right into, hey, I have a criminal record and I have, 5 service dolphins or what have you. And there's a place to deal with addressing each one of those questions. And the first interaction is probably not that place. So, but being prepared for that. And that is a really important theme, which is many tenants, many applicants have no idea. They've never been taught. I'd say a lot of us had probably never been taught what it means to put together a thorough application, what it means to be a good tenant, what it means to follow through on your lease obligations. There simply isn't really education in our education system that deals with that. And if an individual is not sort of taught that by their family or the community, they end up simply not understanding it. There's just, how would you know if you had never been taught before? So giving people the guidance on how exactly to put together this information to put yourself forward in the best possible light. Utility payment plan options. So if you've had, so these are things that are going to come up on your background. If you've had issues in the past with utility bills, this can cause a couple of challenges. Number one, if the bills are not included in the rent, they could have some issues in getting utilities connected. So that is important to know because it might become a negotiation point when dealing with the landlord. It might be something where if somebody is working on paying off a past utility bill, that they're going to want to look for a housing situation where they're not having that utility bill in their name. Either that's through either being maybe subleasing a room and having a roommate, or looking for a unit that includes those utilities in the rent itself. But also, there are ways of dealing with utility companies and looking at prepaid plans or assistance programs that could help them clear out some of those balances as well as deal with with upcoming utility bills. So rental assistance program information, we mentioned that a little bit earlier, just talking about making sure they understand what's available, having documentation on hand to clarify the financial arrangements with potential landlords. So the process can be somewhat confusing. Housing authorities typically have someone that can walk them through it, and it becomes in a lot of cases the obligation of the tenant to sort of coach the landlords in a lot of cases, especially with small mom and pops, on what that looks like as far as you're signing up for a Section 8 voucher. Don't let the documentation scare you. It's really only 4 or 5 pages, and there's only about 10 things you got to fill out. Of course, the government makes it look much scarier than it needs to be, but we have a couple of links to YouTube videos that walk landlords through exactly what those things mean. And then, credit reports. A lot of individuals have no idea what the credit score is. They have no idea if there's derogatories on there, if it's accurate or not. It's free to get a credit report. Each credit reporting agency is mandated by law to give individuals one free credit report every year. There's plenty of websites that do that. You can go directly to the large ones. There's Resource Credit Karma is one that kind of is a free service that allows and we're not affiliated with them in any way, but it's just one that we have had a lot of experience with, where an individual can sign up for free and see what their credit score is. And then once a year, they can pull an actual detailed credit report that does not impact their credit score. Important to do this, or if, like, again, if the individual has a caretaker or someone else that can offer assistance in ensuring that that credit report is accurate, that there are not things on there that shouldn't be on there. And also understanding where their credit score is, because that can help them address if it's going to be a challenge or not a challenge. There are things that you can do, everything from the selection process of the type of property itself up through addressing the landlord and being prepared. So refining your strategy. And again, if anybody has questions or wants clarification on any of this during it, please just jump in. We already went through this, so I'm gonna jump through a couple of these. Really, these are the step-by-steps on getting prepared for the application process, identifying where you want to live, what's your budget, what are the utility costs, how do those factor in, preparing your documentation, and then compiling your rental history, addressing past issues, rental assistance programs, know your rights and responsibilities, very important. A lot of tenants, I would say in my career, probably once or twice a month, I would have a conversation with a tenant who would put on their application that they had an eviction on their record when they didn't. The individual would think that because they were asked to move because someone was selling the house, that they were evicted. Or they would think that because the landlord terminated their lease and just said, hey, we're not going to renew, that that was an eviction. They do not, and I would say that that is very common. And so you have individuals who are checking yes on an eviction. An eviction has a very defined legal definition. But because of not understanding what that is and how it applies to the process, you have individuals that are checking yes that they have an eviction when they don't. That application is probably getting denied. It's not even getting denied by a property manager. It's getting denied by a computer before it even gets to them. And so, part of understanding your rights is understanding in helping individuals to understand, what do these different things mean when a landlord is asking, have you been evicted or have you left? Have you not received your deposit back because of damages, et cetera? Both, what you need to disclose. And again, we individuals should never mislead, should always tell the truth, but that does not mean that you have to that you don't have the option of explaining. And I think that that is the most important thing. You want to get to the point where it's not just that checkbox, so where even if you have an eviction, you can go through and kind of humanize that a little bit and explain, here's what it was, here's what happened, very much like a criminal record. That goes a long way to putting to bed that concern the landlord might have. Um, Understanding the process and making a list, being organized. So create a list of possible rentals either on paper, on your phone, or online to stay organized, and make a schedule. Making sure that if an individual is calling around asking if the unit's available, that they're going to be doing it in a place that's, that's quiet, that doesn't have a lot of distractions or noise in the background. Really want to put their best foot forward. Identify the preferred areas. Again, this may or may not be possible depending on the location and the options, but understanding at least where the units are. You don't want an individual putting in an application and paying an application fee for a property that is too far away from the things that they need to be able to have access to. Oftentimes, that application fee is not refundable, and those fees can add up very quickly. Setting a budget, understanding utility costs, preparing the documentation, and compiling residence rental history. Now, when we get down to the schedule aspect of it, and we're going to go into this a little bit more about some of the actual process. Oh, it's a typo. All right, so finding a rental. Again, online, phenomenal resource. The technology has really improved access to a lot of rentals. It's made it confusing. It's also made, in some cases, it's also, I think, created a little bit of a scarier environment as far as scams sometimes. So one of the things that we run through is making sure that individuals understand how to protect themselves from scams. But for looking for rentals, Zillow, apartments.com, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, rent.com, etc. Online groups can be a fantastic resource, not necessarily just rental groups, but any type of affiliation group, whether that's a community group, education group, ones focused on school, religious affiliation, etc., are all great places to ask and to look for possible units, especially non-traditional units that are coming up. Word of mouth, so ask friends, coworkers if know any available units, and then local ads. Don't forget the newspaper. In a lot of small communities, especially the smaller mom and pops that might only have one unit that's available every now and then, often those are going to end up on a community bulletin board, a grocery store, and the local newspaper. So those are really good resources, especially because the closer the renter can get to the decision maker, the more likely they are going to be to overcoming any challenges they might have because they have the access to be able to explain them. So check with churches or other faith-based organizations in your area. They may know of available rental units and support programs for those in need. Contact nonprofit organizations that provide rental assistance or connect tenants with housing for specific at-risk communities. We work with a program here in Oregon called the Oaks Alliance, which is specifically focused on assisting homeless individuals that are HIV positive. And there can be organizations that have a very specific mandate. Often, when talking to other nonprofits, they're going to be aware of them. So housing authorities, et cetera, it's always good to ask if the individual has a specific status, regardless of what that is. Is there an entity, an organization that might offer support to that individual, whether it's housing or anything else? If you're a veteran, check with veteran support organizations, which may have resources or listings for available rental units for veterans, and expand your search area. Consider looking for rentals outside of your preferred location or neighborhood to find more available options. This is a little bit more in depth on subleasing, so I'm going to skip over most of this. It simply deals with the mechanics of what a sublease is. And I want to get to some of the more process-oriented stuff. But if anybody has any questions on this, let me know. Subleasing in general, I think, is just another word for some variation of a roommate situation or taking over an existing lease. And there's different flavors, of that. So now we get into the process of making contact. We have a portion of our course that focuses on role playing, and you being in this industry a long time, you would not believe some of the way that you get contacted. And there is a lot that can be done to put people in the best light possible. And I think often individuals simply just don't understand what the process is and the way that they should approach it. And that the person that they're contacting um, might get 50 or 100 calls a day. And so you want to make the barrier as low as it can be for them choosing to contact you back. So voice calls, when you're making a call to a potential landlord or property manager, introduce yourself, leave your name professionally, and clearly state your purpose for calling, and go from there. Leaving a message. If you need to leave a message for a potential landlord or property manager, be sure to speak clearly, slowly, provide your name, contact information at the beginning and at the end of the message. I would say that all of this is common sense. I would also say that 95% of the calls or text messages or emails I get are some variation of, yo, is that property still available? I don't know. We have properties in 14 states, so I'm not sure which one you're talking about. But the same thing is true, that first contact, you want it to be efficient for the individual. You also want them to be put in the best possible light right from the beginning. So email or social media messages. When sending an email or messaging on social media to a potential landlord or property manager, be sure to use professional email address and to check your grammar and spelling carefully. There are individuals who should absolutely get a new email address because the one that they have is not putting their best foot forward. And some individuals don't use email. And of course, as things go more and more electronic, sometimes caretakers or others assisting individuals may need to help and message on behalf of them, which can be very effective as well. And I would say that there's no downside to contacting a potential landlord on behalf of somebody else, as long as these same kind of guidelines are followed. So when texting, message to a potential landlord or property manager, keep the message brief and to the point. So examples of contacting potential landlords or voice calls. So formal, hello, my name's John Smith. I'm calling to inquire about the rental property you have advertised on, whatever street. Okay, great. You could, if that's not somebody's personality, and we kind of run through this, it's fine to say, hello, this is John. Or, hey, it's Jane. Leaving a voicemail. Good afternoon. My name is Susan. I'm calling to inquire about the rental property you have advertised, or just, hi, this is Tom. I'm calling about the property. And it doesn't need to be formal, but it does need to be clear and concise and I think respectful. So emails, dear whoever, I hope this email finds you well, kind of normal or informal. Hello, I saw your rental on XYZ Street. I'm interested in checking it out. So that same kind of, thought process, which is identify very quickly who you are, why you're contacting them, specify the property, maybe it's the city, maybe it's the street, etc. You're going to have the best chance of hearing back from somebody if you make it easy and clear as to what you're contacting them about. So things to not to disclose. So don't disclose. Don't disclose personal or medical information that isn't relevant to the rental application process. There, again, could be a time to do that. It is not at the very beginning, and in a lot of cases, it may never be relevant. So we encourage people to, don't overshare, and especially if it's medical, they do not ever need to disclose it. Don't discuss personal problems or issues that may raise concerns for the landlord. Avoid using slang, abbreviations, or informal language in your communication with the landlord. Now, that's not to say that you have to be formal. It's just you want to be as concise and professional as you can. Someone should not feel like they're being fake, but I try to tell individuals, pretend like you're talking to your pastor or your grandma, et cetera. That's the type of language and interactions you should have. Don't badmouth your current or previous landlords. Don't lie or misrepresent your situation. Avoid making promises or commitments that you cannot keep, whether that's going to see a unit when you possibly can't. I would say over communicate is important. So applications. Be prepared before reaching the application stage to ensure you've gathered all the information you need. So when you're at the application stage, this individual should know their budget. They should know the market they want to be in. They should know how much they could afford. They should have an idea of the different rentals that are out there way before they ever submit an application, because almost all applications, again, they're certainly going to require time, but many are going to require an application fee as well. So communicate first. Before submitting your application, make an effort to speak to the landlord or property manager. That's really important. Oftentimes, an individual might submit an application and the landlord or property manager has no idea who they are. They don't even know if the person's doing it, is it an accident? And that happens with a lot of companies. So you definitely want to, before you submit that application, know that someone on the other side is going to be watching for it. So know your law. Familiarize yourself with your state's laws regarding application fees. Again, some states, if you submit an application and you're not approved, are required to refund your application fee as long as it was rented to somebody else before your background was run. So in Oregon, for example, they have to rent to the first applicant who successfully passes the application process. Any other applicants who have submitted an application after that, they have to have their application fees refunded. So be honest. Integrity is key to your rental application. Attach documents. If the application allows for you to attach documents and there's relevant information to include, absolutely include it. This would be especially true if there's something on your background, the individual's background, that they believe is going to lead towards to a negative response. Evictions, criminal record, things of that nature. Potential issues. So it's good to bring up things that can be seen as a benefit ahead of time. So if you don't have pets, it's not a bad idea to highlight that. I'm not saying that pets, are something that people can't have, but there are landlords that have no pet policies, and there are landlords that, for very good reason, have no pet policies or have very bad experience with pets. So if an individual doesn't have them, again, not saying that you can't, but if you don't, I would bring it up. Hey, I don't have pets, just me. It's just going to be me, and I sit there and I'm quiet and I'm going to pay rent. That is the ideal, possible tenant. If your primary income is non-traditional, consider getting a part-time job that provides regular pay stubs. May not be relevant, but it's something that's interesting, or that could be relevant for somebody. Be willing to follow the rules of the rental property, such as not smoking inside or complying with noise restrictions. Again, not all of these are things that everyone would be interested in or would apply, but to some individuals, they may make sense. Consider offering to take care of certain tasks or responsibilities at the rental property, such as landscaping or minor repairs. Following up. So after submitting your rental application, remember to send a brief message or call letting them know that you have completed it, and to contact you if they have any additional questions or need additional information. Again, should follow the same type of process as earlier. Short, concise. Hello, this is Richard Sherman. I submitted the application for the unit we spoke about. Please let me know if you need additional information. My number is, or my email is. Don't ever assume that the individual, has your contact information right there, and make it as easy as possible for them to get back to you. If you haven't heard back within a week or so, it's appropriate to follow up again to ask for an update on the status of your application. Again, it should be quick, concise, to the point. If the landlord has given you a specific timeline for when they will need to make a decision and get back to you, it's appropriate to follow up after the timeline has passed if you haven't heard back. So don't feel you should absolutely follow up, but you just don't want to be a nuisance. So it's generally not recommended to follow up more than once a week or to be too persistent, as it can come across as pushy or annoying to the landlord. So, hey, I just wanted to check in. A lot of that can be handled with the tone, just the coaching, a quick email. Hey, I just wanted to check in. I understand you're busy. Just let me know, when you know if there's any information or if you have any questions, you'll let me know. It gives you an opportunity again to possibly address any concerns that they might have. And this is just a couple of examples of that. So yeah. Hi, this is Richard, recently submitted application. Just want to check in. Okay, tips. Avoid making any negative comments about the property or location, as this can make the landlord think that you may not be happy to live there. Might make them think you're high maintenance. And landlords, again, this, we're coming from an industry standpoint, so we're going to tell you exactly how landlords, property managers feel. They want their life to be as simple and easy as possible. The last thing they need is a tenant who every single housing situation they've ever been in has been the worst one ever, because typically, the common denominator there is the tenant. Again, not saying that's fair, but that's exactly how landlords and property managers think. So you don't want to say anything negative about the property. You just want to say, be appreciative, be polite. Don't demand the landlord make any repairs or changes to the property before you move in. There might be a time to do that if there are actual issues or repairs, but the time to talk about that is not when you're first seeing the property. The time to talk about that is down the line when you're looking at signing the lease. Or if the issues are that big that, it might not be the property that that you would want to rent. So don't try to negotiate the rent or lease terms before you've been approved as a tenant. So you need to kind of take that step, those processes in the proper order. And again, those first impressions are going to be important, and landlords are going to look for reasons to deny individuals that they think are going to be a challenge. Avoid asking for special favors or exceptions to the rental requirements, that this may think the landlord feel that you're trying to take advantage of them. Especially true when dealing with very small mom and pop landlords. And again, even if there are certain things to deal with, the time to talk about them is down, is not when you're first meeting the person to look at the property. Don't forget to proofread your communication with the landlord, ensure that it's free of spelling and grammatical errors. Leases and rental agreements. Okay, read every word. I know it's hard. I would still do it. Most times you're not going to be able to change what those leases are. So it's not necessarily about looking for things that shouldn't be in there. Most leases, at least ones by larger companies, are written by attorneys, and they're going to be, legal if nothing else. But what you're really looking for are errors or problems or things you weren't aware of. So, does it have the proper number of people there? Are there things that you didn't know about? Like you thought electricity was included, but it wasn't, or you thought that there was 2 parking spaces, but there's only 1. You didn't realize that there was a RUBS charge, which is a utility bill back, things of that nature. Are they charging you pet rent and you don't have a pet? So that's what you're looking for. Get it in writing. Ensure that all terms, including rent, deposit, pet fees, and utilities, are clearly outlined in the lease. If it's not written down, it's going to be he said, she said, and the landlord's probably going to win that. So you just want to make sure everything's there, written down. Confirm the lease start date and end dates that you agreed upon. Understand what happens if you break your lease. Some landlords, and this could be something that's negotiable. You could put a clause in there, say, if I need to break the lease, what are the charges, just so you understand what they are. Individuals who have transient that are going to be moving around, or think that there's a possibility that they might be moving, there's a chance to ask for a break clause. Hey, if I need to move in 6 months, can we have it where I pay $500 flat as long as I give you 30 days notice, something of that nature. Document condition. So document condition of the unit. Everybody, when they rent a unit, should do one thing. They should take out their cell phone, they should put it in video mode with a flashlight, and they should walk through every room and shine it on every single wall, the ceiling, and the floor, the baseboards, the doors, and all the appliances. It takes 5 minutes and it's perfect documentation of exactly what the condition is. The number of actual court cases that I have seen where an individual ended up having a real problem because of not doing that is substantial. And in some cases, it doesn't have to be malice. It doesn't have to be a landlord or a tenant trying to get away from something. It can oftentimes just be confusion or misremembering or dealing with property management changeover or repair individuals who maybe were not as forthcoming as they should have been. So very easy to do now, something that everyone should do. Understand the rent. You got to know exactly when it's due, where to pay it, how to pay it, and what the acceptable payment methods are and the consequences of late payments. Very important that individuals understand that. Not only is the single most important thing, other than maybe, not burning the place down, is paying on time consistently. So understanding, what does that mean? Is rent due the first? Is it often there's a grace period of a day or two? Does that mean it has to be, can it be paid online? If it's going to be mailed in, is it when it's postmarked or when it's received? Things of that nature. So individuals understand how to pay. And clarify utilities. Make sure the lease specifies which utilities you're responsible for and what the landlord covers. Pet policy. So understanding, can I have pets? What are the requirements? What are the restrictions? Almost all landlords are going to have restrictions based off of size or breed of dogs. Those are almost all driven by insurance company requirements. Now, again, when we talk about medical, so assistance animals are not pets. They are medical equipment legally. And so those rules, as far as breed, size, et cetera, do not apply to assistance animals. However, policies around the pet's cleanliness and taking care of them and damage absolutely apply. So regardless of whether the animal is an assistance animal or not, the tenant is still responsible for upkeep and damage that pet may cause. Maintenance and repairs, understand how maintenance requests should be handled and who's responsible for what repairs. For example, are you responsible for changing the filter on the furnace? Are you responsible for changing the batteries in the smoke alarms? If there is a maintenance portal, is there something online that you submitted? Does it need to be put in writing, you email or text it, etc.? Subletting and guests. So understand what the rules are around guests and subletting. Really important situation to understand with guests and especially individuals who have some type of a situation that lends to others having the ability to take advantage of them. And that can be all kinds of different things. It can be mental, capacity or instability. It can be education background. It can be familial issues, etc. Often individuals will try to assist others and allow somebody to come stay with them. It's going to vary by state, but in almost all states, once that individual has been in that unit, that guest has been in that unit for 30 days, they are a tenant. They have tenancy, which means that they have to be evicted. Even if the tenant, the original tenant, doesn't want them there anymore. I'd say 5 or 6 times a year across our various companies, something like that happens where a tenant has to evict a friend or relative or whatever who's just came to crash on their couch for a couple of weeks and ended up staying and won't leave. So individuals need to understand what that means and then also what the restrictions are from the landlord. Typically, landlords are going to want anyone that's there more than 14 days to be added to the lease. So lease termination, be clear on the conditions under which you or the landlord can terminate the lease early and any potential penalties that are involved in that. Renewal terms, so check if your lease renews automatically or if it switches to a month-to-month agreement at the end, or if you need to sign a new lease. And if you do, being proactive about that. So contacting the landlord ahead of time. Moving in. So this runs through, we provide a checklist of things that tenants should be doing when they're moving in. This kind of runs through those. And most of it is not necessarily anything we need to talk about. I would say, you know, when an individual first gets there, part of doing that walkthrough with with the phone is, do the cleaning ahead of time, plan for pest control. Typically, tenants are going to be responsible for pest control of the unit. That's not always the case, and it depends on the type of unit it is, but in a lot of cases, once the individual is there, they're responsible for the ongoing pest control. Usually the larger buildings and landlords are going to have some type of building-wide pest control, but the unit itself is going to be responsibility of the tenant. So learning about emergency exits, understanding what that process there is, understanding where if there's a fire suppression system or if there are, fire extinguishers, et cetera, where are those at? How do you get to them? Securing your space, make sure that you know how to secure all access points to your home, including any windows. A good chunk of what we run through is how to be a great tenant. It's a lot of work to get a good place. Keeping it is so much easier than finding a new one. So paying rent on time and early, maintain open communication. So, keep communication open with your landlord. If you change your phone number, let them know. Again, doesn't need to be long. Just, hey, FYI, here's my new phone number. If you need anything, let me know. Keep the property clean and tidy. Doesn't need to be fancy, just got to be clean and tidy. Report maintenance issues early. It is really important that individuals understand that it is better to report small issues than to let them become really big issues, especially dealing with water leaks or things like that. So oftentimes tenants don't want to be a nuisance, and so they won't say anything. But a lot of it comes down to how you do it. And a quick, hey, by the way, the toilet's running, not a big problem, but I just wanted to let you know. Toilets can use 6 gallons of water a minute. One toilet in an apartment building can cost an apartment building over $1,000 a month if it's running nonstop in some cities based off water costs. So landlords want to know about it. Seek permission on changes. If there are changes that need to be done to accommodate for medical issues, it's still important that individuals let the landlords know what those are and get approval for them. So follow the lease terms, thoroughly understand what they are, comply with it, minimize wear and tear. So treat the rental as if it's your own home by avoiding unnecessary wear and tear, use fixtures and appliances responsibly and keep them clean. All of these are going to lead towards that landlord wanting to renew that contract. Keep your landlord updated with any changes in your contact information. Be proactive about lease renewal. So if you're coming up on it and you want to renew, don't wait to the last minute and request a reference. So if you adhere to the practices, don't hesitate to ask the landlord for a reference, even if you're still a tenant. And I think that is a good thing to add to the file. Properties get sold, property managers change, landlords change. It's a good idea, I'd say every year or two to, hey, can you just write me a quick email? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, or it can just be, on a sheet of letterhead. Say, hey, this person's always paid rent on time and they're a great tenant, never have any issues. Understand your lease, what repairs and maintenance is your responsibility and what are the landlords. Perform small repairs. If simple fixes like changing light bulbs or unclogging drains can often be done yourself and faster and easier than dealing, with anybody else. Report major ones promptly. Keep a record. Document the condition of the property, any damages or issues when you move in. Again, back to using the phone, taking that video and saving that. Communicate in writing. So for important repairs, follow up verbal communications with a written request. This is important for tracking. Oftentimes things just get lost in the shuffle. You might tell a maintenance person, you might tell the owner, and they just forget it. So following up is a good reminder. And based off of the tone, it's not necessarily seen as nagging. It's just say, oh, hey, FYI, I know we spoke about it. I just wanted to send you, a text, let you know, just remind you about it because I know sometimes I forget to write stuff down. You can make it very soft and easy. And I think most of paying rent, always use trackable payment method. Never pay rent in cash. Never pay rent in cash. I'll say it again, never pay rent in cash. Uh, it is a really bad idea. I have been in court in front of a judge looking at a property manager who the tenant said they had given $4,000 in cash and back rent to, and the property manager said they never got it. And I, one, can't prove to the judge that the tenant didn't pay it. And though I believe that property manager, I have no way of proving it. So we have a strict policy that we accept no cash. The only cash that ever would come to any of our properties is going to be deposited into the bank directly. So it's important that tenants understand that. Go get a money order, right, and do it that way because, again, it doesn't have to be nefarious. It can just be accidental. So never paying cash due to the risks of misunderstanding, theft, and loss. Keep receipts of money orders. So if you use a money order, always keep the receipt, even if you just snap a picture of it, because money orders get lost. And if you have the receipts, you can get them replaced. Pay directly to authorized recipients. Ensure that rent payments go directly to the landlord, the authorized representative, or through an approved online platform. Don't trust anything that's emailed or texted to you if you don't know who it's from, or even a letter posted on your door. Verify before you send a payment in any other way. Avoid cash deposits and payment boxes. So if there's a deposit box that you can drop rent into, again, never pay in cash. Always use a money order, check, or any another method. If you're paying online, check for fees and check for other options. Sometimes credit cards might have a larger fee than, say, paying with an electronic check. Do not rely on those to pay your rent. Um, Hundreds of times in my career have I dealt with people that are behind or getting evicted because they relied on somebody else, family member, friend, etc., to pay the rent that they were giving the money to and they thought the rent was getting paid. This is especially true with elderly and disabled individuals who, for unfortunately, we're being taken advantage of. So it's important to coach individuals not to rely on others. And if they do need assistance, to do it through a trusted individual. Maybe that is a pastor or a caseworker, et cetera. Someone who has a fiduciary duty to them or a moral duty to them. Stay informed about payment policies. So what's acceptable, when's it due, what the grace period, and what the late fees are, and set up payment reminders. Use the technology for your benefit. Guests, real simple. You are responsible for your guests' behavior in all things. So limit who they are and limit what they do, and ensure that guests are aware of quiet hours, limit overnight stays. And if they're bringing pets over, don't. First off, just don't. But if they do, they have to follow the same rules. Address complaints promptly. If neighbors or your landlord raise concerns about your guests, address these issues courteously and promptly. I think that goes for not just guests, but yourself and your family members. If there's something that comes up, don't be defensive. Just, okay, I understand. We'll remedy it. Won't be a problem. Rent increases are just a part of life. It's going to happen. The vacancy rates are very low across the country, and typically the amount of housing, especially affordable housing, is not increasing. Most new structures being built are single family homes, and so when we look at from a unit count, so when you look at the percentage of overall units available for the more affordable end of the spectrum, those are not keeping up with population growth. So it's important to mitigate that to the degree you can. So understand your lease. Some leases will have automatic rent increases built into them. In some areas, cities and states have rent control. Oregon has statewide rent control. So we're allowed to raise rent a maximum of 7% plus CPI for that for the previous year. Some markets are going to be controlled by that, and then also different types of subsidized housing might have different types of allowable increases. But understanding what that process is and when you might know about it, and there's strategies to mitigate some of that. So negotiate early. Start discussion with your landlord about renewing your lease well before it ends, expressing your desire to stay. Um, and maybe there's some wiggle room on keeping the rent the same or maybe a small increase. Inquiring about longer leases. Sometimes rents increases will be reduced or there might be the same, or you might be able to get a little bit less by signing a longer lease if it's a property you want to stay at. So signing a 2 or 3 year lease. Offer to take on tasks, again, back to different types of maintenance. Demonstrate good tenancy. So remind your landlord that your punctuality with rent. And I think there's a way to do this to say, hey, I try to be a good tenant. I really think that you're a great landlord. I want to stay, you know, um, can we, but I can't afford a $50 increase. Is there any way that we can keep it where it's at, et cetera? So ask about payment timing. Um, if individuals have a reason that they need to be able to break up payments, or for example, if they're on a set income and their income comes in the middle of the month, those are all items that can be negotiated. It's just important that it's done up front and that it's explained. It's not something you want to spring on them. Rent's due the first. Oh, by the way, I don't get my check to the 15th of each month, so I'm going to be late. It's like, no, you need to handle that, up front. So um, ask about referral discounts. Um, a lot of large property managers have referral discounts or credits. Certainly something that is worth asking about. Evictions. Understand your lease. Familiarize yourself with your lease terms, obligations, maintain open communication. So this is getting into if somebody is going to be evicted, it's either typically going to be non-payment. I'd say that's probably 80% of all evictions are some type of a payment issue. The remainder are going to be either lease violations or sometimes illegal, some type of an illegal activity going on. In all of those situations, if an individual can avoid going to court, they're going to be in the best position possible. In almost no situation is going to court going to work out better for the tenant, unless the landlord is simply lying, I guess, for lack of a better term, in what is going on. So if the person owes the money, the judge is going to say, you owe the money, you need to pay it. If you don't pay it, you got to go. They may get a few extra days, et cetera. But anytime you go to court, you're going to incur additional court costs, and there's a much higher likelihood of that going on the record. So if somebody is in a situation where unfortunately they're unable to pay or they need to leave, the best thing to possibly do, and this is assuming that they've exhausted any financial assistance or other ways of handling the situation. The best thing to do is to negotiate some type of an amicable handover. So going to the landlord and saying, hey, if I clean it and give it back to you, will you just let me walk away and not report this on my credit or not do an eviction? Often landlords will say yes. What they want is their property back. So if you make that easy, that's the best way to approach a bad situation, and that's cash for keys. Sometimes they might actually even give you a little bit of money to move. So again, not an ideal situation, but something that does come up. And I would say at the very least, it would be a negotiated handover, and maybe even a little bit of money to move. Legal consultations. So consult with a tenant attorney or legal aid service if you face potential eviction to explore legal avenues of your defense. And this is assuming that it is, a defensible position. And even if it's not, if there's legal assistance there, absolutely. And again, varies by state, varies by city, the process and the length of time that it can take. Document everything. Keep a detailed record of all communications, payments, and notices related to your tenancy and any disputes. Understand the eviction process, be aware of the steps involved in the eviction and timeline to better prepare and respond effectively. Plan for the worst. Have a contingency plan in place, including saving and moving costs. Hopefully nobody gets to this situation. It does happen though. And I think the most important thing there is don't just walk away. Avoid abandoning the property without notice, as this can lead to detrimental legal and financial consequences. It is always better to address the issue up front. I think in most cases, nobody wants as we say, the only winner in an eviction is the attorney. It's not the landlord, it's not the tenant. At the end of our course, we run through a bunch of different resources, and I've linked a bunch of them here. We deal with all types of different groups, and I think it's important to understand that, you know, we believe fundamentally that everyone is entitled to a safe place to live. It doesn't matter about their background, their history, what they do, what they've done, their status, any of that. Everyone deserves a safe place to live. That's our guiding philosophy. It doesn't mean we condone or don't condone anything else. We just believe that anyone deserves to have a roof over their head. And from that standpoint, we link any assistance program that we're aware of that could be of interest to different groups. And no, I didn't throw it in. All right, that was the last. Sorry about that. I thought I had my statistics sheet in there, but it looks like I just had the blanks. I had some statistics specifically um, for the rural Midwest, and I think the one that was most compelling for me, and one actually that Carly had brought up, is that in North Dakota, close to half of all individuals who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness currently or in the past 24 months have some history of traumatic brain injury. That number is I blew me away. I could that was so much higher than I thought it would be. I know some of the statistics that we hear very commonly, especially here on the West Coast, is that the concurrence of homelessness and mental illness and drug use is about 60%, at least in our populations here. And so there are different challenges that lead to, you know, that type of a status and being homeless. And it is a situation that perpetuates itself. Having experienced it in the past 24 months makes the individual much more likely to continue to experience it. In rural areas, there's the rural homelessness problem is much less visible than you see in a lot of the major cities. And so there's a very um, a lot of the numbers underreport because they are not accounting for things like doubling up. So individuals who have two or more families living in a space that is really, you know, only for one, or living in housing that is substandard for the environment and the climate that they live in, living in housing that is really designed for temporary housing, not permanent. And all of those numbers don't show up in some of the homelessness statistics, though they certainly are, you know, not what we think of when we think of traditional housing. So, all right. Well, with that, I appreciate everybody's time. I think we ran a little bit over, but if anybody has any questions, you know, my contact information is on the registration, and Carly said she had to pop off, so I really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, I'll stay on for a little bit. If not, thank you all very much. And rentercertification.org is our website. Again, totally free for anyone to take the course, and all of the follow-up assistance from our staff is also free of charge. Thank you, everybody.